Gyeongju, a city that holds 1,000 years of history. The cherished values, preserved over time, have shaped who we are today. Now, through new encounters, we step into a better future. Sustainability, innovation. With the spirit of connection, a new millennium story begins. As APEC and Gyeongju come together. APEC meets Gyeongju.
In our headlines on this Monday, November 10th, here in South Korea, government officials and ruling lawmakers agree on a new greenhouse gas emission reduction range targeting up to a 61% cut compared to the level recorded in 2018 by the year 2035. Meanwhile, on the trade front, exports recorded their best quarterly performance in the third quarter of this year, led by chips and cars, and an expansion in the number of small and medium-sized exporting companies. Also, we are counting down 3 days to this year's college entrance test, during which over 500,000 test takers nationwide will sit down for the annual scholastic examination that sets the future path of their academic endeavors. South Korea will seek to slash its greenhouse gas emissions by 53 to 61% compared to the levels seen in 2018 by the year 2035. Our political correspondent An Sung-jin has details.
The government and ruling Democratic Party have reached a consensus on South Korea's 2035 greenhouse gas reduction targets. A high-level policy consultation meeting on Sunday was attended by Prime Minister Kim Min-seok, leader of Democratic Party Jung Cheong-rae, and Presidential Chief of Staff Kang Won-sik. At the meeting, the target for reducing South Korea's greenhouse gas emission under its 2035 nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement was set at the 53% to 61% range.
For a sustainable future, reducing national greenhouse gas emissions is a task that can no longer be postponed.
The government had presented two final candidate plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions last week by either 50 to 60% or 53 to 60%, compared to 2018 levels by 2035, replacing the current target of a 40% reduction by 2030. Through this meeting, the upper limit has been raised by 1 percentage point, a move interpreted as showing the government's stronger commitment to reducing carbon emissions. Civil society groups had called for a 65% reduction, while industry representatives proposed a 48% reduction. The government and ruling party pledged to seek additional support to ease the burden on industries through measures such as the KGX Green Transition Strategy to support Korean companies in transitioning to decarbonized industries and to foster the growth of a greener society. The final target range will be approved by the Presidential Commission on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth and the Cabinet this week, before submission to the UN next week. Other items on the agenda included tax relief measures aimed at sustaining the recent rise in the KOSPI stock index. The initial government proposal was to impose a top tax rate of 35% on dividend income exceeding 300 million won, or around $206,000. However, the ruling party called for lowering the top tax rate to 25% in an effort to strengthen shareholder value and reduce the tax burden for income earned from stock dividends. So the ruling bloc is considering a revised plan. Though the two sides now seem to have settled on a 25% top tax rate, the final rate will be fixed through discussions at the upcoming regular session of the National Assembly. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Presidential Chief of Staff Kang Won-sik is visiting the United Arab Emirates this week as a special economic envoy. On his agenda is defense industry cooperation with senior UAE officials. The UAE signed a contract back in 2022 to purchase South Korea's Cheongung-2 missile system. Its Crown Prince, Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed Al Nahyan, was in South Korea for the APEC forum late last month and sat down on the margins of that multilateral meeting with President Lee Jae-myung. On the trade front, exports recorded their best quarterly performance in the third quarter of this year, led by chips and cars, and an expansion in the number of small and medium-sized exporting companies. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young has more.
Exports expanded during the July to September period, marking a 6.5% increase from the same period last year to reach $185 billion. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Monday, this expansion marks the largest quarterly export figure since the ministry began compiling relevant data in 2010. The growth also marks the second consecutive quarter of year-on-year growth, following a 2.1% rise in the second quarter. In addition, the number of exporting firms grew 4.5% year-on-year to nearly 70,000. The ministry explained that although unresolved South Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations could have weighed on exports through the third quarter, strong semiconductor shipments led the overall export growth. By type of goods, exports of capital goods led by semiconductors increased by over 11%, while consumer goods led by automobiles rose nearly 5%, ending 4 consecutive quarters of decline. By company size, SME exports surged nearly 12%, led by increases in consumer and capital goods. Mid-sized firms also posted strong results, with exports growing 7%, primarily in capital goods and raw materials. And large enterprises saw an over 5% rise in exports driven by capital goods. The ministry noted that increased semiconductor exports were the main driver for large firms, while growth in semiconductor parts and equipment boosted medium-sized companies' exports. While automobile exports to the U.S. and China fell, shipments to Europe increased, driven by robust demand for electric vehicles. Total imports saw a modest rise of 1.5%, amounting to $162.4 billion. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
On the local bourse, the benchmark KOSPI index gained ground on this Monday following last week's tumble over fears of an AI bubble. The index closed at 4,073.24, regaining 3% after plunging past the 4,000 mark last Friday. Shares of Samsung Electronics rose over 2.2% to surpass the 100,000 Korean won mark again. Shares of SK Hynix also soared above the 600,000 won mark. Meanwhile, the local currency strengthened slightly against the US dollar, trading at 1,451 Korean won at the day's close. Defense Minister An Gyubek says a future fleet of nuclear-powered submarines would be a triumph of self-reliant national defense. Speaking to local media this past weekend, An asserted the presence of such a submarine would strengthen South Korea's readiness posture against North Korea, rendering the regime's leader, Kim Jong-un, quote, unable to sleep. He also claimed it would be practical to build the submarine here at home rather than over in the US, and forecast the project would be completed within 10 years. After approval for this ambitious plan, US President Donald Trump added the fleet would be built at a shipyard in Philadelphia. Meanwhile, in yet another disturbing development, North Korea-supported hackers remotely reset smartphones here in South Korea using Google's location-based tracking system. Our Ian Jin explains.
Genian Security Center, a South Korean cybersecurity institute, released a report on Monday to say that a North Korean-backed hacker group has carried out a destructive cyber attack that remotely controlled Android smartphones and PCs to not only steal personal information, but also completely wipe key documents. The distribution of malware through a messenger platform impersonating trusted acquaintances is a method that has been analyzed to be typical of North Korean cyber attacks. But according to the threat analysis report, this latest incident reveals a new, unprecedented attack technique. The malware infiltrating the victim's smartphones or PCs contained webcam and microphone control features, suggesting that the attackers could have monitored the victim's activities in real time. Using Google's location services, the hackers confirmed when the victims were away from their desks at home or office, then executed a remote wipe command on Android personal devices, deleting all stored data. The report explained that the remote reset halted normal device operations, temporarily blocking notification and message alerts, which effectively cut off the account owner's awareness channels, thereby delaying detection and response. This demonstrates tactical maturity, marking the development of what is called Advanced Persistent Threats, or APTs. The Cybersecurity Institute advised smart device users to actively practice personal data security measures, such as enabling two-step authentication, avoiding saving passwords automatically in browsers, and turning off PCs when not in use. Further, it emphasized the importance of device manufacturers strengthening multi-factor authentication systems. 이은진, Arirang News.
The Trump administration is demanding U.S. states, quote, undo any action taken to fully fund food assistance for their less privileged families, threatening potential penalties. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
The Trump administration is directing U.S. states to halt full food aid payments to low-income families, claiming such payments are unauthorized. A new memo from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which oversees the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, has instructed states to issue only 65% of benefits this month. This follows a Supreme Court decision allowing the administration to withhold part of the funding while legal challenges continue. More than 42 million Americans who depend on SNAP began receiving reduced benefits due to the ongoing federal government shutdown, now in its 40th day. Some states, including New York, Massachusetts, California, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, had continued to provide full benefits after a lower court ruling ordered full payments. The USDA memo now demands that those states immediately undo any full distributions and recover excess funds, warning that failure to comply could lead to the suspension of federal administrative funding or penalties for overissuances. Meanwhile, the economic strain on the prolonged shutdown is deepening. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Sunday that while the U.S. economy was fantastic under President Trump in the last 2 quarters, growth for the current quarter could be cut in half if the shutdown drags on.
We had a fantastic economy under President Trump the past 2 quarters, and now there are estimates that the economic growth for this quarter could be cut in by as much as half if the shutdown continues.
The comments come as millions of federal workers remain furloughed, while key public services continue to suffer disruptions. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump on Sunday defended his economic policies, touting what he called the dividend of a strong America. He announced that every American, except for high-income earners, would receive a dividend of at least $2,000 per person, crediting his tariff policies for the nation's wealth. Claiming that the U.S. is now the richest, most respected country in the world, Trump called the dividend a reward for the country's economic success. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back here on the local front, we are counting down 3 days to this year's college entrance test, during which over 500,000 test takers nationwide will sit down for the annual scholastic examination that determines their future academic path. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
These packages are among the most heavily protected parcels in the nation. They contain the test papers for the Suneung, or the College Scholastic Ability Test, which are being distributed to 85 test districts. The papers are being transported under heavy security and will be stored at secure locations until the exam this Thursday. This year, 554,174 students are registered to take the test at 1,310 centers nationwide. The Education Ministry says it is working with teachers on site to ensure a smooth process over the final 3 days.
For the remaining 3 days, we will meticulously check to ensure there are no disruptions to the exam. The Education Ministry will do its best, together with the teachers, preparing on site.
Nationwide support measures will be in place this Thursday to ensure students can take the exam without disruption. The exam runs from 8:40 a.m. to 5:45 p.m. to prevent traffic congestion, the government has requested public offices and businesses to delay their start times until 10 a.m. During the peak student commute from 6 a.m. to 8:10 a.m., subway services in the Seoul metropolitan area will be expanded. Scenes like this, test takers getting out of a police car will not be a surprise, as police will also provide emergency escorts for students running late to ensure they arrive on time. Additionally, private vehicle access will be prohibited within 200 meters of test site entrances, requiring students to walk the remaining distance. Strict noise control measures will be enforced. Drivers of buses and trains near exam sites are asked to slow down and avoid using horns, while construction and public events are requested to minimize noise. These measures will peak during the 25-minute English listening test starting at 1:10 p.m. During this window, all aircraft takeoffs and landings nationwide will be suspended, and all military exercises, including artillery fire and tank movements, will be halted. These nationwide efforts underscore a society pausing in support of the test takers, who are also mostly teens, reflecting the same hopes and fervent prayers of parents nationwide as they try to reach their full potential. 김도현, Arirang News.
In other news, K-culture influencers worldwide gathered here in Seoul for a festival aimed at fostering cultural diplomacy. Our Seoul was there.
Held at the CKO stage in central Seoul, the K Creators Awards kicked off the 2025 K-Wave Festival and honored global influencers, honorary reporters, and winners of the Talk Korea contest who have promoted Korea's culture in unique ways. Streamed live on KoreaNet's official YouTube channel, the event opened with a dynamic taekwondo performance by junior K-Tigers, followed by remarks from a culture ministry representative.
In 2025, fueled by the global popularity of K-pop Demon Hunters, interest in Korean lifestyle, from food and fashion to traditional houses and medicine, is spreading worldwide. This growing closeness between Korea and the world is made possible by the passion and dedication of those who share and celebrate Korean culture.
Awards were presented to 15 individuals from around the world, recognizing their efforts to share Korean stories beyond just pop music.
Of course, I'm happy and feel proud of myself because this is my first time for me, and it keeps reminding for me to keep growing.
In this opportunity to create content about this topic, for me, it's really amazing for this connect with these people around the world.
And I think Korean literature is a hidden gem, so I want to introduce people to it and share my passion. And actually, I think Middle Eastern countries can learn from Korea's experience because they have some similarities.
After the ceremony, winners embarked on a 9-day cultural tour, exploring Seoul's landmarks and experiencing the depth of Korean heritage firsthand. The Culture Ministry says it hopes that events like this will help Korea share its creativity with the world, not just through K-pop, but through every facet of its culture. Seoul, Arirang News.
Shifting gears to esports, South Korea's T1 has made history by clinching its third straight League of Legends World Championship title this past Sunday. In an all-Korean final held in China, the team led by legendary captain Lee Sang-hyuk, known as Faker, defeated KT Rolster in a close match. Sunday's win also marks T1's 6th World Championship victory since 2013. No team has won more world titles than T1.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. A powerful super typhoon has slammed into the Philippines, forcing nearly 1 million people to evacuate and killing at least 2. Super Typhoon Fung-Wong made landfall late on Sunday night in Aurora Province on Luzon, with winds of 185 kilometers per hour and gusts up to 230 kilometers per hour. By early Monday, it had weakened slightly, but continued to pound Luzon with torrential rain and destructive winds. Authorities warn of life-threatening storm surges and floods. Airports in the area are closed, and nearly 300 flights have been canceled. The storm comes just days after Typhoon Kalmegi hit the Philippines, killing more than 200 people. Authorities say Typhoon Fung-Wong will move northwest through Monday before heading to Taiwan midweek. In the UK, the BBC's two top executives have resigned following a backlash over how the network edited a speech by U.S. President Donald Trump. Director General Tim Davie and new CEO Deborah Turnus announced their resignations on Sunday, saying they take full responsibility over a documentary on the 2021 Capitol riot. The documentary edited a section of Trump's speech, putting together two parts of the speech that were actually more than 50 minutes apart, sparking accusations of bias. Both leaders said they're stepping down to protect the broadcaster's credibility. The British government has pledged to help the BBC restore public trust as it searches for new leadership. In Brazil, a powerful tornado has torn through a town in the south of the country, killing at least 6 people and injuring hundreds just as the country prepares to host the UN Climate Summit. The storm hit late Friday with winds reaching 250 kilometers an hour, destroying about 90% of Rio Bonito do Iguaçu in Paraná State, home to 14,000 residents. Authorities say more than 750 people were injured, and rescue teams are still searching for the missing. The state governor has declared 3 days of mourning, and President Lula has ordered emergency aid to the region. The disaster struck just before Brazil hosts the UN Climate Summit COP30, which is scheduled to begin on Monday in the northern port city of Belém. Lady Gaga and Kendrick Lamar lead this year's Grammy nominations as K-pop earns its first ever spot in the Song of the Year category. Lamar tops the 2026 list with 9 nominations, including Album of the Year for GNX, while Gaga follows with 7 for her electropop record Mayhem. 2 K-pop tracks, Rosé and Bruno Mars' Apatu and Huntrix's Golden, made with their inclusion in the main song category. It's also the first time that 3 rap albums appear on the Album of the Year shortlist. Winners will be announced in Los Angeles on February 1st, 2026. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
As the cold air came down from the north overnight, sudden cold appeared this morning across the country. The morning temperature in Seoul plummeted to 5.4 degrees Celsius, about 5 degrees lower than yesterday morning. This early winter cold will continue until Wednesday morning. The daytime temperature in Seoul will rise up to 15 degrees, back to the average temperature for this time of year. However, the daily temperature range will widen by 10 degrees. Please take good care of your health by dressing warmly. Tomorrow morning will start cold at 3 degrees in Seoul and Daejeon, and Gyeongju 4 degrees in Daegu. Highs will top out at 14 to 18 degrees all over the country. On Thursday, the day of college entrance exam, the skies will be clear with mild temperature without any sudden cold. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.
81일은 자연으로 다시 돌아간다.
이게 그 신발이구나.
100% 생분해되는 신발입니다.
야, 너무 신기하다. 엄나커즈 검증 타임. Let's go.
저기 걸으면 이렇게 압력이 나올 거예요. 그래서 실제로 얼마만큼의 힘이 들어가고 스트레스를 몸에서 받는지도 다 측정을 하는 것이죠. 그래프를 보시면 달리기를 하고 근육의 활성도가 피로도가 왔기 때문에 떨어졌고 이제 리커버리 신발을 신고 휴식을 취하고 난 뒤에 데이터를 보시면 짧은 시간 안에 근육 활성도가 현저히 증가한 것을 확인하실 수 있습니다. 그럼 결론적으로는 피로도가 리커버리 되었다.
Officially certified by the American Orthopedic Association and attracting global investors left and right. Finalists at the world's largest outdoor trade fair. How about a fast post-run recovery?
Korea, a globally recognized sports powerhouse. Behind the dazzling achievements, there's always an invisible force at work. With sophisticated materials, cutting-edge equipment, and innovative technological solutions, SMEs in the K-sports industry play a vital role in bolstering Korea's status as a sports powerhouse. By integrating AI technology, they unlock athletes' potential and enhance performance, elevating the sports environment to the next level and opening new markets in the sports industry. Their innovative technology and bold challenges drive the growth of Korea's sports industry, creating a better world through sports. The innovation of these SMEs never stops. A systematic partnership support program is implemented to discover promising sports SMEs, provide technical validation and R&D support to enhance competitiveness, and strengthen the foundation for overseas expansion. At Tokyo Sportech 2025, the technological prowess of Korean companies was recognized. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and the Korea Sports Promotion Foundation supported K-sports companies with product promotion and business consultations with global buyers, demonstrating product quality and market potential, and confirming the possibility of expanding into the global market.
저희는 ICT 강국으로서 바이어나 사용자들한테 신기술을 접목한 생활 스포츠 기회를 실질적으로 확대할 수 있는 그 기회를 제공하는 데 많은 도움이 될 수 있으리라고 확신을 합니다.
이제 스포츠도 K죠. K 스포츠는 이겁니다.
The joy for all, created by the power of K-sports. Experience the future of the new sports industry through the innovation and technology of the Korean sports industry.
North Korea is warned of more offensive action in light of the recent security talks between South Korea and the U.S. that took place here in the country last week during U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's latest Asia visit. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to this week's first edition of Press Perspective. It's Monday, November 10th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. North Korea continues to denounce defense talks between South Korea and the US, even as the regime itself commits to drive forward its military partnership with Russia. For more on this, I have Shreyas Reddy with news website NK News here in the studio. Shreyas, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Dr. Bong Young-sik at the Yonsei Institute of North Korean Studies. Dr. Bong, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Pleased to be here.
Right, Shreyas, we'll start here in the studio. Let's begin with some background information regarding North Korea's latest threat of, quote, offensive action in response to recent security talks between South Korea and the US.
Yeah, so over the weekend, North Korean Defense Minister No Kwang-chol essentially issued this threat of offensive action, as you mentioned, in response to what North Korea describes as the Trump administration's brazen moves in conjunction with South Korea. Essentially, they said, we have understood the US hostile intent, and so we will take action in response to it. This is quite standard for North Korean threats where, as far as they're concerned, any activities involving the US and South Korea are hostile actions aimed solely at Pyongyang, and then essentially they always warn of a countermeasure or firm response. And so in this case, it was sparked by a combination of two things. One was the visit of the US nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS George Washington, which arrived in Busan last week, as well as US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's visit to South Korea, where he visited the DMZ and also held annual security talks with his South Korean counterpart, Ang Kyu-baek. So in the annual security consultative meeting, the two ministers essentially decided, they pledged to continue joint efforts toward deterring North Korea, highlighting the continued threats, the continued buildup, and said they're going to be on the same page. And I think for North Korea, if they were perhaps hoping for a shift in the Trump administration in terms of dealing with North Korea, they certainly didn't get that. So now what they're seeing is Pete Hegseth pledging cooperation with South Korea. That to them is very much, as North Korea often says, practically a declaration of war, or places them on that footing. And so North Korea did what it always does, threatened to counter US-South Korea military cooperation.
Right, and Dr. Bong, ahead of this threat by Pyongyang, British online newspaper The Independent cited South Korean intelligence officials warning of a possible North Korean nuclear test should its leader give the order. What do you believe are the prospects of a nuclear test by North Korea in the near future, Dr. Bong, keeping in mind the current state of geopolitics?
If North Korea is going to conduct another nuclear test, there will be the 7th nuclear test conducted by North Korea. And it is a political decision. There is no technological hurdle for North Korean authority to go ahead and conduct another nuclear test than the Punggye nuclear test site. By the way, those nuclear test tunnels at the Punggye site were supposed to be irrevocably and irreparably destroyed by North Korea's own voluntary action in 2018, and somehow they have been miraculously recovered enough to be able to conduct nuclear tests. So when it comes to North Korea's promises for denuclearization, you have to take them with a grain of salt and make sure that you verify the result. By the way, the potential 7th nuclear test by North Korea will not make much sense, because what North Korea needs is a reliable delivery system to carry nuclear bombs to anywhere inside the United States in order to prove that North Korea indeed possesses sufficient nuclear second strike capability against the United States. North Korea does not have to build more or more sophisticated nuclear bombs. What North Korea is a delivery system that will penetrate the missile defense system of the United States and that of South Korea. So if North Korean authority determines to conduct another nuclear test, it may, but what's the strategic benefits for North Korean military just raising tension in order to get more attention from the Donald Trump administration of the United States. President Donald Trump already made it clear that he's willing to talk with the supreme leadership of North Korea. It was North Korean leadership balked at having another meeting with the U.S. president on the Korean Peninsula. So I don't see much benefits or justification for North Korean authority to conduct another nuclear test. It will be total waste of time, resources, and the test.
Right. And before we touch upon prospects of a meeting between Mr. Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Shreyas, as I mentioned earlier, North Korea has taken issue with South Korea's security talks with the U.S., but the regime itself appears to be forging ahead with its military partnership with Russia. In fact, there were talks held in Pyongyang last week. Could you tell us a bit more about that encounter?
Yes, so there was a visiting Russian military delegation led by Vice Defense Minister Viktor Goremuikin, pardon my pronunciation. And so we don't actually have a lot of concrete details about what they did during their brief visit to North Korea, but we do know that the delegation held talks with North Korean Defense Minister No Kwang-chol. Essentially, North Korean state media just put out a basic two-line report saying that they met and didn't really tell us much about what was discussed. And separately, the same delegation also met with officials from the Korean People's Army's General Political Bureau. And it was essentially about boosting cooperation, exchange, and coordination between the two countries' militaries and defense ministries, which is very much something that is a recurring trend with North Korea. So even though we saw no real specific agreements during this meeting, at least none that we know of, it was very much about sending a message of continued military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. And that was the message that kind of kept coming through in these brief reports, that this is aimed at continuing the cooperation that Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin have already furthered in line with the two countries' comprehensive strategic partnership agreed upon last year, which is essentially a military alliance by any other name. And so we've seen that play out on the battlefields of Ukraine with troop deployments and weapon supplies, but it's quite possible that the two countries will look to take this even further, and so they will continue having regular talks and meetings like this going forward.
And staying with this alliance, Dr. Bong, how concerned should the international community be about the continued military partnership between Pyongyang and Moscow?
Well, the rest of the countries in the international community would definitely prefer to see acceptable and peaceful ending of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia that has started in February 2022. Now it's over 3 years, and no one would like to see more casualties and destruction. So North Korea's involvement in Russia's military conflict with Ukraine is a concern for the entire international community, and military assistance and partnership between the countries is a source of great concern. But at the same time, Russia has not really crossed the red line set by the United States, Japan, and South Korea, especially by South Korea, which is Russia providing essential technological assistance to North Korea development of more sophisticated military satellites, nuclear missiles, and other advanced weapons systems. So North Korea's military involvement in Russia has been focused on supply of the armories, especially artillery shells, and the deployment of the 11th battalion. But the casualties on the part of North Korean troops deployed to Russia have been so significant. North Korean military was actually deployed to actual battlefield situation during the period from December 14 last year and January 14 this year. And out of 12,000 North Korean soldiers, 2/3 have been either killed, about 2,000 of them got killed, according to the estimate by the National Intelligence Service of South Korea, and additional 6,000 were severely injured. So if 2/3 of your troops are either killed or seriously injured, not to be deployed back to the battlefield, then that means your troop is essentially completely demolished. So the lessons drawn by North Korean military from this battle-tested experience in the military conflict between Ukraine and Russia is that the country is miserably failed in military modernization, and North Korean troops are not battle ready in any modern warfare conditions because they are totally defenseless against drones. So it's going to make great deal of a psychological ripple effect among North Korean soldiers and their families because they're going to see 2/3 of their fellow soldiers are returned to homeland either cold dead bodies or severely injured. Then they will realize that despite all this grand propaganda issued by the government, they are powerless. They are not really up to the task and challenges to deal with South Korean military and U.S. forces in South Korea. And it's going to make a critical blow to public loyalty to the regime after this tragic loss of young lives among the North Korean troops deployed to Russia. So I think there will be a limited effect on the part of Russia-North Korea military partnership because the war is in a stalemate, and the North Korean authority knows very well that the utility and leverage of North Korea upon Putin government of Russia will be diminishing if the prospect for ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia will be materialized in near future. So time does not favor North Korean authority because the utility of North Korea to Russia is going down. And this is a critical variable for the future military partnership between Russia and North Korea.
Right then, against that backdrop, Shreya, the South Korean Unification Ministry has undergone some structural changes, reportedly advancing efforts to ease tensions here on the Korean Peninsula. Could you tell us a bit about these changes and also about the concerns raised by some pundits, that is, with regard to the lack of monitoring North Korea's human rights abuses?
Well, I think the Unification Ministry, perhaps like many other ministries, but in some ways even more so, tends to be very politicized. So every time there's a change of administration in South Korea, the priorities often tend to change. So where the last government deprioritized and essentially defunded exchange initiatives related to exchanges and cooperation with North Korea and tried to place a greater emphasis on spotlighting North Korea's abject human rights record, in the case of the Lee Jae-myung administration, it's been about trying to reverse track and go back to an era where there's more cooperation or at least engagement with North Korea. And so Lee Jae-myung has emphasized his END initiative for dealing with North Korea, which revolves around exchange, normalization, and denuclearization. And so that exchanges part has figured prominently in the Unification Ministry's budget proposal for this year, essentially restoring it to, and in some ways going beyond previous levels, to try and promote more cooperation with North Korea. The question is, of course, will North Korea respond? But that's another matter. But as a result, there have, of course, been concerns about how much South Korea is putting the focus on the human rights aspect that the Yoon administration was keen to emphasize. Now, the biggest share of the Unification Ministry's budget is still for humanitarian initiatives, but more focused on specific themes like climate change or environmental issues. And so what we've instead seen is there was about $2 million earlier that was allocated for spotlighting North Korea's human rights issues, and that has now been eliminated from the most recent budget. And as a result, quite a few observers, particularly those in the human rights space, have said this is a matter of concern. While many have welcomed the focus on engaging North Korea. Some believe that South Korea should not be taking its attention away from also critiquing North Korea's problems and downplaying those concerns. Fundamentally, we're right now in a situation where the US has also perhaps to some extent deprioritized human rights issues, and with South Korea also doing so, there are questions. Who's going to stand up and be the leader on the world stage when it comes to addressing North Korea's human rights issues? And so that is where perhaps it feels like there's a bit of a void now. And so certainly some pundits and some in the human rights community believe South Korea should be the one stepping in to fill that void.
Right. And Dr. Bong, speaking as a scholar, what do you believe are the pros and cons, if you will, of the current South Korean administration's North Korea policy? And before you answer that question, Dr. Bong, how would you characterize the current administration's North Korea policy?
I would characterize the current administration North Korea policy based upon many contradictions with a good intention. So it does not have any strong prospect for success because North Korean leadership would not have any strong incentive to listen to North Korea policy of the Lee Jae-myung government as such. The pros of the current government's North Korea policy are its attempts to reduce the dangerously escalated military tension between the two Koreas during the previous Yoon Suk-yeol government, like sending drones to Pyongyang and up the ante of the use of force in case of North Korea provocation. So the attempts by the Lee Jae-myung government to cool the temperature on the Korean Peninsula so that the situation will be so facilitated for the North Korean authority to come out and talk to the United States and South Korea for possible peace deals, including denuclearization, would be one of the major pros. The cons are there's no consistency or the well-planned roadmap in the North Korea policy of the Lee Jae-myung government. As Mr. Reddy said, that Lee Jae-myung government North Korea policy is premised upon three principles: that South Korea respects the North Korean system, and South Korea has no intention to have hostile actions against North Korea, and South Korea will not pursue unification by absorption. And as an extension of these three principles, President Lee Jae-myung announced END policy in his speech delivered in this year's United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York in September. END. E means exchange, and after exchange, South Korean government will pursue normalization, and normalization will lead to denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. But exchange is not a non-starter. It's a non-starter because for any inter-Korean exchange to take place, there should be sanction reliefs on North Korea, and those are not in the authority of South Korean government. North Korea knows very well that any economic sanctions on North Korea will be dependent upon the decisions of the Trump administration of the United States. So North Korean authority has no reason to talk to Lee Jae-myung government of South Korea, which has no realistic power to make any substantial change on the front of economic sanctions on North Korea. North Korea is better off to wait for the beginning of the communication and dialogue with Washington, not with Seoul. And the concept of normalization is also problematic. The normalization assumes that the current situation on the Korean Peninsula is not normal. It should be normalized. Then what should be normalized? Are you talking about the current situation, the division of the Korean Peninsula with the two Koreas? Then the answer to correct the abnormal situation on the Korean Peninsula is one of the two. Either separation of the two Koreas permanently as two separate sovereign states without pursuing unification as avowed by Mr. Kim Jong-un himself in December 2023, or peaceful unification, which is stipulated in the Article 3 and 4 of South Korean Constitution. So in order for Lee Jae-myung government's E&D policy to be materialized, South Korea needs to revise its constitution and abrogate Article 3 and Article 4 in order to deal with North Korea as a separate sovereign state, to normalize currently abnormal state on the Korean Peninsula. And there's no guarantee if the situation will be changed in terms of Lee Jae-myung government's definition of normal state on the Korean Peninsula. There is no guarantee that new state on the Korean Peninsula will definitely lead to denuclearization of North Korea, because North Korea wants to be recognized by the United States and other countries as a de facto nuclear power state. So any talks in the future regarding North Korea's nuclear weapons will not be denuclearization according to North Korean government's position. It should be nuclear arms control talks. So these three elements, E&D, sound great, but does not really make sense in terms of possibly generating meaningful change of behavior on the part of North Korea. And there's a great deal of problems regarding revision of Constitution of South Korea.
Right, hence your view that the policy includes contradictions but with good intentions. Perhaps expanding on the thoughts of Dr. Bong Shreyas, there was a pundit who shared his thoughts on the online news magazine The Diplomat, where he spoke about how the South Korean administration's North Korea policy is built on outdated assumptions. Could you very briefly go over that for us?
Yes, so in this case, the pundit highlighted three underlying assumptions that he said were flawed, which is that the policy assumes that North Korea is isolated. Two, it still desires unification. And three, that it is willing to give up its nuclear weapons. And as Dr. Bong just pointed out, fundamentally, all of those are incorrect. North Korea is no longer in the place it was at the end of the Cold War, when these principles were kind of formulated. It has strong international partners, particularly Russia and China, so it no longer feels the need to rely solely on the US and South Korea. In terms of unification, Kim Jong-un very openly walked away from that 2 years ago and hasn't shown any signs of moving towards that again. And denuclearization, well, that's a non-starter because North Korea enshrined its nuclear status in its laws 3 years ago, and since then has consistently maintained it will refuse to talk to anyone else as long as they insist that North Korea gives up its nuclear weapons. As far as it's concerned, those are its fundamental right, and it will never yield on those demands.
Right. It has claimed that talks with the US will only take place if the Trump administration removes the word denuclearization from the table. All right, Shreyas, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Dr. Bong, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching.
필라테스 기구는 전 세계에 4가지 기구가 있습니다. 캐딜락 리포머 배럴 체어. 거기에서 할 수 있는 동작